All right, GrrCON, we're still going. Are you still going? I love this. Man, it's like day 2, it's midday. Everybody's hungover, but they're all still energy. So that's good. All right, the housekeeping things. Yeah, that's great. Number 1, you're in ballroom C. So if that's not where you wanted to be, if you didn't want the anything track, I don't know how you survived a day and a half at GrrCON. If you need to get out, go now. Second thing, cell phones. Make sure they're silent. I don't care what you have to do to them to make them silent. Just make them silent. I wore boots for a reason. I'll come crush you. Just turn them off. All right. So with that, we are going to get our next speaker up here now. We are talking about the threat of departing employees and the data they've had access to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Thorsen.
Hey, everybody. So this is my first time at GrrCON. Super cool so far, so I'll be back next year. Maybe not as a presenter, we'll see how today goes. I want to give you a little bit of background on myself. So I'm not a salesperson, I'm actually in security. I wear a lot of different hats at Code 42. And one of them is running our own tool as part of our insider threat program. So I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of big picture insider threat, and then a narrower use case, which is departing employees. And we picked departing employees as one of the elements to talk about because it's really something that runs across industry. Everybody's dealing with it. A lot of cases when organizations, I do a lot of benchmarking. So I'll talk to organizations just to better our security practices, get other ideas. It's super helpful. But we talk about insider threat, and a lot of organizations are skittish about just that terminology and the thought of like monitoring their employees and things like that. And they'll usually say, hey, we hire awesome people, we trust our employees, all these things. And those things are all true. And at Code 42, we do the same thing. One of the elements to always think about in that space, though, is that not all insiders are malicious. There's non-malicious, we're all humans, right? Like we all hire people. And people make mistakes. And so those mistakes can be costly to organizations. So I wanted to kind of frame the discussion and level set with that before we sort of dive in here. The other thing I'll note is this will be a much better presentation if you guys have questions or sort of want to interact. Because believe me, I'm going to get bored listening to myself for 30 minutes. I'm going to cruise through these slides pretty quickly. So stop me at any point, throw a hand up, shout out, and then we can take questions at the end too, so just feel comfortable. So this is a true statement. Departing employees do equal departing data. And I'm going to try to... and the odds are that your organization is suffering from a data loss, leak, or theft event, and you probably don't even know it because there's a gap in the stack from a technology standpoint. And part of this is detection response is lacking for most organizations. 90% of insider data loss, leak, and theft goes undetected until after the fact. Some of the trends I'll talk about here, and we're sort of building a case as to why this is kind of a scary situation. Employees are looking, like over half of employees in the United States are looking for their next role. And half of those individuals that are looking have been at their current employer for less than a year. So think about loyalty to organizations. That's probably a thing of the past, right? It's sort of moving on, what's the next challenge? And depending on what industry you're working in, some employees are just targeted that much more. If you're working in security, you're probably getting pinged on LinkedIn offers like constantly, and so that's sort of always churning out there. So it's something to think about. And more employees are quitting. Employee quits have risen every year for the past decade and totaled 40 million in 2018. So it's a big number and it's a big churn that's out there. The other challenge is data portability and exfiltration vectors are increasing, right? It's becoming more easy to get data out of organizations just by tools that we're using every day, right? Cloud services, web browsers, devices, And then communications channels, Slack, email, like you name it, right? So we're powering these individuals that are leaving organizations with like vectors and things that are very easy to get data out of our organization. So, and the fact is that quitters are taking data with them at some alarming rates. So 60% of departing employees admit to taking company data. The other 40% are probably just lying when they talk about this, right? I've done it in previous roles, right? Harmless type things, but it happens. 70% of IP theft happens in the 30 days before the employee puts in their resignation. So think about that, right? They're not gonna take data after they put their 2 weeks notice in, some do, but the time they're gonna do it is when they're looking for those roles and they're on LinkedIn and they're prepping for an interview. They want to position themselves in the best possible light that they can for their next role. And this is also true. Departing employees are the single biggest insider threat to data loss for organizations. What's also true is 24 million people took data from their previous employer in 2018. And the why is for all the reasons that we just touched on. Data is more portable than it's ever been. Data loss detection is lacking. There's gaps in visibility in the security stack. Employee loyalty is on the decline. Employee quits are on the rise, and quitters take data. Yet, given all of this, most companies say we don't have a departing employee workflow or process to manage this. And that's something I find too. As I mentioned, I do a lot of benchmarking. When we talk about insider threat, offboarding processes and things like that, even the very mature companies, larger organizations that have a mature security posture, the insider threat space is often overlooked for a variety of reasons. So less than 20% of large enterprise companies have a well-defined incident response scenarios for insider threat. So that's something that we learned in our data exposure report and looking through the data or the Verizon data breach report. And certainly something that I see and have conversations with partners and peers in Minneapolis when I talk about this. The reality is that this is damaging, and companies often don't have an idea that quitters took data until the cat's already out of the bag. And it can have some pretty big ramifications depending on what that data is. Another truth is that prevention fails. You're missing a critical layer of protection if that's what you're hanging your hat on. I have worked with organizations deploying traditional DLP, which blocks. The reality is that DLP can be a great tool, but it's not just a tool. It's something that causes a huge resource impact to deploy and roll out, and it can take months and even years, depending on the size of your organization, to get that rolled out. You have to employ a number of human resources to build policies, to block data, and then when people find a way to get around that policy, you have to come up with permutations of that policy to continue to block. And it's a vicious cycle. The other challenge is that employees that are just trying to get their job done are blocked from doing that. So productivity takes a hit, people get ticked off, and what usually happens is organizations will spend all that time, all those resources, and then just shut the prevention off because it's just too noisy and they can't manage it. So it's interesting. So the root cause is there's a data visibility gap in the security stack. So there's a lot of tools out there for identity, prevention. There's some tools that cover the detection space. There's a really big gap from detection to recover. So response and recover are pretty big gaps for a lot of organizations. And that's actually a place where Code 42 does really well. So it kind of helps to fill that gap. So most organizations don't know what data is where, who had or has the data, when data is leaving the organization, and what data is leaving the organization. The other thing that's not on this slide is who are the actors that are taking that data with them? Like, where's that going? So there's a big visibility gap. And the fact is, when employees steal, your companies are trending in the news, on social media, chat forums, things like that. And the damage can be significant. It can be certainly reputational damage, financial damage, legal churn, things that are distracting from what the organization is trying to accomplish. One recent case was McAfee. So they had a couple individuals who were conspiring to take trade secrets with them. And the interesting thing about this is it's not super hard. So if we look at who they weren't super technically savvy. Sales ops, finance people. I mean, not that they can't be technically savvy, but you know, it is what it is. And the timing wasn't super secretive. They took it on the last day. They worked. The method that they used to get it out wasn't particularly sophisticated either. It was a USB drive and email. In the haul, what they got from a data perspective was a lot of data that was going to help them at their next role at Titanium in those roles. So again, that's something that has a reputational hit for McAfee. Doesn't make Titanium look particularly good, and then you've got all this churn. But the fact is that they were able to get data out of that environment relatively easy using pretty unsophisticated methods. So, employee offboarding. This is what the typical offboarding process looks like. So, employee gives notice, HR submits a ticket or provides notice to the manager, what have you. IT and security remove access and systems, and the employer turns in laptop and badge on the last day. So the big piece that's missing in that process is the data, like the visibility piece. So we're removing assets and removing access and things of that nature, which is important, but the piece that's missing is the data. So an offboarding process could look like this. A lot of the same steps on the front end. So employee gives notice, HR submits a ticket, IT and security remove access to systems. With Code 42, the other step that you do is you add that employee to the departing employee monitoring queue. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then they go off through the separation process. So we do take a different approach when it comes to data protection in this space, and focus is monitoring, investigation, and supporting response and recovery. We collect all of the endpoint data that employees are handling, right? So that's a benefit, right? The data is just backed up automatically, and so you've got access to it. So your security team or your SOC team has access to that information when they're doing monitoring and investigations of high-risk employees. One might be departing employees. Other scenarios for high-risk employees might be individuals that are on performance improvement plans, right? If you get on a performance improvement plan, there's two paths. So one is either I'm going to turn it around, I'm going to be a good employee, I'm going to like kind of get the ship righted. The other path is I'm going to make your job manager hell for the next 90 days and just be a huge pain in the ass. I'm not happy. I'm susceptible to taking data. But it's individuals that might be involved in M&A activity. It could be individuals with elevated privileges, access to source code, whatever is important, trade secrets for your organization. That's what we sort of center that around. And so with Code 42, again, it's collecting it, giving that monitoring insight, detecting events through alerts and triggers, that prompt investigation. And because you have all the files, you can put context around those actions. Who's using it? Why is somebody in marketing handling a monthly payroll spreadsheet, and why did they upload it to a USB drive, right? Those are the things that sort of you get insight into as you're going through the investigation process, and then the response piece, so pulling in the right partners depending on what that activity looks like. So we'll run through a quick scenario. So Alex accepts a new job in sales with a competitor of your organization. Puts his notice in, security adds him to the departing employee monitoring queue in code 42. Security reviews what Alex did before he put his notice in. So what we do, what my team does, is we'll take a 90-day look back and we'll look at anomalous file activity in that period of time. We'll reach out and do investigations as needed. In this case, there wasn't anything that looked suspicious for that period. The next thing that we do once we complete the look back is they stay in that departing employee monitoring queue, and we set file alert activity. So it's file size, volume, there's this number of factors that we can alert off of, and they stay in that queue until they separate from the organization. So in this case, 3 days later, security gets an email alert that Alex added files to Dropbox just a couple of minutes ago. So security, because we have the files, looks into what Alex put in Dropbox, and most of it seemed harmless, W-9, resume, things that are his, but one appears to be a customer list. And given the fact that he's in sales, that's probably a problem. So security has the capability to just restore that file and instantly look at it, put context around the action, and verify that in this case, yeah, it was some sensitive data that he shouldn't be taking with him. So then you have the options of how to handle it in the context of the situation. In this case, we would reach out to Alex's manager. Alex's manager would sit with him, watch him permanently delete that information from Dropbox, and we're probably going to shut down and take some additional action on the back end to limit what he's able to access and things like that as he separates. So that's the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any. Other people have scenarios they want to mention or talk through. I'd be happy to talk through or answer any of those questions. Yeah, so that's a good question. So code 42 is an agent that is on every endpoint device. So it doesn't matter if you're on network or off network, we still have visibility. That backup cycle is still happening. And so you're covered in that scenario as well. Yes? Not today. That is an item that's on a roadmap though. Yeah. Yes? Yeah, I mean, that can be what we do though too, if you think about maybe bigger picture in that respect, is when you get hired at an organization, you know, there's in some cases an agreement that's put into place. You have to go through and acknowledge like acceptable use and things like that. So it's important to, you know, establish kind of the rules of the road up front and just be open and transparent as you can as to what we're doing. You know, at Code 42, everybody knows what our product does, so we'll see more non-malicious type things. And when I think about like insider threat, like I always assume positive intent, and I have my team assume positive intent. That's important because at the end of the day, the risk you're managing is your employee base, right? People that you work with every day, you definitely see things in insider threat that you just can't unsee and you don't ever want to see again, type of a thing. But you do want to instill trust, so transparency is important. And then reiterating, like, we're not trying to catch you doing something wrong. In some cases, we're actually trying to protect you. And people make mistakes. Like, that's it at the end of the day. Like, the majority of what I've seen in the past in this space has been, you know, people making mistakes that, while not malicious, can still be very costly to organizations. Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's time today. If you haven't had lunch, you can get back out there. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of the conference.